That's me, Cascadia, and that's my hiking partner, Raptor. We've been friends since college, and even though we live on opposite sides of the country, we still make it a point to do a backpacking trip together every year. This year, it would be the Wonderland Trail in Mt Rainier National Park. The Wonderland Trail is a 93-mile hiking trail that encircles the majestic Mt Rainier and Mt Rainier National Park. This scenic trail offers hikers a diverse and breathtaking landscape, including pristine alpine meadows, ancient forests, cascading waterfalls, vibrant wildflower meadows, and glacier-carved valleys. Along the way, hikers can enjoy panoramic views of the snow-capped peak of Mt Rainier as they make their way around the mountain. The trail provides a challenge with the amount of ascent and descent, but the reward is well worth the effort. Hikers are treated to jaw-dropping vistas and a sense of serenity and awe as they immerse themselves in the natural beauty of this iconic national park. Now, if we take a look at our itinerary, we decided to start at Longmire and hike clockwise. We chose to do the Spray Park alternate on the northwest section of the loop. Our plan was to hike the trail over 9 days with the following campsites. We were fortunate with the early access as we were able to reserve almost all of our desired camps. Also, instead of carrying 9 days worth of food at the start, we cached food at 2 places along the route, which helped to lighten our packs. And lastly, we chose to do the loop at the end of July when snow on the trail should mostly be melted out. After all the planning and preparation, it was time to finally start our adventure. It was time to disconnect from our everyday responsibilities and routines and immerse ourselves in nature. We started with a climb up Rampart Ridge. It seemed appropriate, given the elevation profile, that our introduction to the Wonderland Trail was a climb. We then descended down to Couts Creek. Looking back at the eroded earth, you could see the power of the flows off the mountain. As with any trip, along with anticipation and excitement, there are unknowns, anxieties, and even doubts. I knew we'd face challenges and uncertainties along the way. Would we be able to meet these challenges? We certainly were going to find out. We arrived at camp and were quickly greeted by the bugs. We immediately put on full coverage clothing and set up camp. This camp had no water, and as the bugs were incessantly swarming me, I thought, I understand why they call this place Devil's Dream. We had dinner, and then our camp neighbor arrived. Maria, a solo hiker from New York City, was well into her Wonderland trek. She had already covered more than half the trail, and we would see her up until her finish at Mowich Lake. Raptor and I spent some time catching up, and then went into our tents to get some rest for the day ahead. It was good to be in the mountains and sharing this experience with a good friend. Day 2 started when I heard Raptor's sleeping pad deflate. That unmistakable sound became the cue to the other person that it was time to get up. Since the bugs were bad at Devil's Dream, we opted to just pack up and hit the trail. We soon came upon an area known as Indian Henry's hunting ground. The alpine meadows with abundant wildflowers and stunning view of Mt Rainier was absolutely beautiful. Indian Henry was a Native American who lived during the 1800s. He was both a farmer and a mountain guide. He guided many notable people, including John Muir in 1888. The area which bears his name today was one of his favorite hunting grounds. Nearby, Satulik Mountain is named after Indian Henry. The bench outside the patrol camp seemed like the perfect place for coffee and breakfast. We came upon the first of two suspension footbridges on the Wonderland route. This bridge over Tahoma Creek is the longest and highest. The bridge is over 200 feet long and 165 feet above the creek below. It was quite the thrill going across the bridge and looking at the water far below us. We climbed up Emerald Ridge where we could see a canyon below us that formed from the receded Tahoma Glacier. The water coming off the glacier was feeding the South Puyallup River down below. we arrived at St. Andrew's Lake. The cool water of the lake was so refreshing. As I sat on the shore being dried by the warm sun and taking in the view of the mountain, I thought, how lucky are we to be here right now?
That green rock under there.
Shortly after St. Andrew's Lake, we saw our first bear. It was quite far away foraging for food, but we could see its black body against the green meadow down below. After dinner, we made sure to catch the sunset on the mountain. As another hiker told us, its sun rises on the east side and sun sets on the west side of the loop. She was right. We were treated to a glorious sunset. I got up early and had breakfast at the lake. Everybody else was still sleeping, so it was especially quiet. I stood there taking in the view of the mountain, marveling at its reflection in the lake while listening to the birds singing. Now this is the way to start your day. The trip to Golden Lakes was short, and we arrived at camp early in the afternoon. After setting up camp, we had a snack and began reflecting on this as well as past adventures. These are experiences we'll never forget. It was relaxing at the lake. We took a dip in the warm water and basked in the sun. There was a spot just outside camp where several of us gathered to catch the sunset. We spent some time sharing stories of our hike up to this point. One of the people we met while catching the sunset would be hard to forget. She shared with us that she was recently diagnosed with cancer and that the prognosis was not good. She said at home she can barely get out of bed and do anything, but here she has been filled with positive energy powered by the mountains and wilderness. She'd been coming to this park her whole life, and there's no other place she'd rather be. Her story was a reminder that our lives can change so quickly. Live today, for tomorrow is promised to no one. The sun coming up over Golden Lakes was the perfect setting for morning coffee and breakfast. Another beautiful day on the trail. Today we'd be picking up our first resupply at Mt Lake. The hike today would mostly be in the forest. The soft tread of the forest with its cushion of pine needles makes for pleasant miles. I find hiking through the lush green forest to be very relaxing. My senses come alive as I hear the birds, smell the plants, and breathe in the mountain air. The morning light coming through the trees is magical. There's a saying, sunlight through the trees feeds the soul. We reached the valley floor where the South and North Mowich rivers flow. It was clear from this expansive field of smooth boulders that the river at one time flowed through here. The long, rock-lined path through the smooth boulders was evidence that the river hadn't flown through here in quite some time. I guess just as many things change in life, so does the path of a river. On the climb to Mowich Lake, we stopped at Carter Creek, which is fed by the lake uphill. It seemed like a good place to break for lunch. Maria made us all some of her wild black currant and huckleberry tea. We reached Mowich Lake and ran into some other Wonderland hikers in the camp area. The camp area at Mowich had trash receptacles, so we were able to empty our trash. Next, we hiked over to the patrol cabin to pick up our resupply from the storage bins outside. We went through the first bin looking for a bucket. It wasn't there. Then the second bin, not there either. We looked at each other a bit nervously, knowing we only had one more bin. Aha, there it is, I screamed. What a relief. We were good to continue the adventure. I asked the ranger at Mowich Lake about the weather forecast since I noticed some dark clouds to the west. No rain today, but rain is likely tomorrow. Ah, so much for my dry long-term forecast before the trip, I thought. We said our goodbyes to Maria as she was now finished with her Wonderland trek. We would surely miss her company and kindness. We hit the trail back down to the junction to Eagle's Roost, now just a couple miles to our camp for the evening. We set up camp and then took the nearby side trip to the magnificent Spray Falls. After some tea back at camp, we got into our tents for some much needed rest for the big day ahead. While planning the trip, I heard about the scenic Spray Park alternate route. This alternate is slightly shorter than the actual Wonderland, but it climbs up higher above treeline, providing an up-close view of the mountain. We would eventually meet up with the Wonderland when we got to the Carbon River suspension footbridge. We got to Spray Park and were treated to its beautiful meadows with wildflowers. We were enjoying the flowers just as much as the area pollinators. The weather was certainly different today. The clouds rolled in and the air temperature was noticeably cooler. We were just waiting for the rain to begin at any minute. Once we got out onto the rocks, the wind picked up, so it was time to break out our rain jackets to block the chilling wind. The terrain became more rocky and was marked by cairns and areas where it was difficult to make out the trail. Just as we began the descent, we started feeling the first raindrops. We ran into a group of 3 hikers that were also going to Mystic Camp. After the long descent, we arrived at the other suspension footbridge on the Wonderland route. This one over the Carbon River is approximately 200 feet long. We stopped for lunch on the other side of the bridge where the alternate route connects to the Wonderland Trail. It was time to fuel up for the long climb ahead to Mystic Lake. As we ascended, we got closer to Carbon Glacier. You could see the formation of the river from the hole at the bottom of the glacier. The fog started rolling in and the driving mist started soaking us. Fortunately, we were climbing, so it helped to keep our internal temperature in check. We arrived at Mystic Lake. The fog and clouds seemed appropriate given the lake's name. We knew there was a view of Mt Rainier from the lake, but for now it would have to remain a mystery. It was getting late, so we decided to head back down to camp and recharge for the day ahead. A few minutes after I got into my tent, it started raining. Ah, what a pleasant sound to fall asleep, I thought. I'll dream of drier, sunnier days ahead. My dreams of a dry, sunny day would have to wait. It rained through the night, and it was noticeably colder. Compared to the previous day, the hike today was going to be an easy one. It was less than 9 miles to sunrise, and our plan was to get to the visitor center in time to eat some real food. After crossing the creek, we got an up-close view of Winthrop Glacier. The ice wall at the lower end of the glacier seemed massive. Now, the clouds were just starting to break to reveal the mountain. There are times on a hike when your mood may be a reflection of the bad weather, but the beauty of a hike is that when you round a corner, everything can change. Maybe it's a view that does it, or the flowers of an alpine meadow. When we crested Skyscraper Pass and looked down below at Berkeley Park, my mood changed dramatically. It was stunning. set up our tents and then hiked a little over a mile to the Sunrise Visitor Center, where we were rewarded with some real food. With spirits high, we awoke to clear skies. There's a lookout just outside Sunrise Camp that's a great spot to catch sunrise. The hiker that reminded us to take in the sunrise on the east side was right again. On the Wonderland Trail, I've learned that if you're not going up, you're going down. From sunrise, we descend 2,000 feet down to the White River Ranger Station to pick up our second and final resupply. We had a short road walk to pick up our resupply. No drama this time. Our bucket was in the first bin we checked. The log over White River was low enough where you could sense the power of the White River just inches below our feet. We decided to stop when we got to the Frying Pan Creek crossing. This seemed like a good place to break for lunch and let our feet recover in its icy waters. Our feet had been good to us, so it was time to give them a break and allow them to recover. We continued the climb to Summerland, guided by Mt Rainier, as if being told, "Come closer, I have more beauty to share with you." Summerland was stunning, and we were fortunate to be here in such great weather. Between the views, wildflowers, and babbling creek, this place felt like heaven. We spent time down at the mossy creek. The creek was lined by flowers as if it were landscaped by professionals. It was relaxing and a good spot to take in the view of both Tahoma and Little Tahoma. We caught up with Kevin, Andrea, and Kendra. They were the group of 3 that had been on the nearly identical itinerary. We very much enjoyed getting to know them over these past several days. I find that hikers develop a strong bond with other hikers they encounter on the trail. There is a shared understanding and appreciation among hikers for the challenges and rewards of the journey. We connect with one another through this shared experience. We're happy to share information and offer support and encouragement. I always say, I meet the nicest people on the trail. The morning light cast down onto our tent signaled the start of another day. We packed up early and hiked back down to the creek. I was really looking forward to today's section since the beginning of the trip. If there was one day where I wished for good weather, it was this one. This section is renowned for its beauty. It made sense to save the best for last, or, in our case, next to last. Today, we hike over Panhandle Gap. At 6,800 feet, it's the highest point on the Wonderland Trail. We heard from some other hikers about a short snow crossing. They mentioned that it was steep, but it at least had a safe run out. We didn't want to cross it too early in the day when the snow might still be hard packed and potentially icy. The gap wasn't far away, so we decided to take our time at breakfast, an easy decision considering this incredible panorama around us. We began the climb from the meadows of Summerland up to Panhandle Gap. We left the meadows and entered the more lifeless expanse of glacial moraine. We got to the snow crossing. Fortunately, there were some steps cut into the snow, and the snow had softened up a bit.
Yep.
I was surprised when we got to the gap that there was no wind. This meant we could take our time and savor the views. The views from the gap were incredible. We had Mt Rainier on one side, then to the south we could see another volcano, Mt Adams, towering above its neighboring mountains. We could see the snow-capped ridgelines of the Goat Rocks Wilderness. We could even see Mount Hood in Oregon. Mount Hood, as the crow flies, is about 165 miles away. Incredible. We descended from the gap, but stayed up high in the alpine area for the next 2 miles before the descent to Indian Bar. We continued across the high plateau to reach the glacial cirque of the upper Indian Bar Valley. The sense of space was amazing. It was time to descend the flower-filled meadows down to Indian Bar. The glacial cirque valley of Indian Bar came into view, and far below us we could see the Indian Bar shelter. It seemed like every wildflower variety was on display. Indian Bar shelter seemed like the perfect place to stop for lunch. To say our spirits were high would be an understatement. We left Indian Bar hydrated with full bottles of water since we would not pass a water source until Nickel Creek. Time to begin the climb up the Cowlitz Divide. I figured the views would be over once we left Indian Bar. Boy, was I wrong. As we got to the top of the climb, there were more surprises. Mount Adams was in front of us as if beckoning us to come closer. I felt like a glutton for views this day. view behind us of Mt Rainier above the subalpine meadows was one of my favorite shots of the entire trip. It was magical. I had to pinch myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming. Now it was time for the long descent to Nickel Creek. We set up our tents and walked down to the creek to have dinner and reminisce about the incredible day we just had. I went to bed that night thinking that this was one of the best days hiking I ever had. Today was the final day. While I didn't want it to end, I was looking forward to completing the loop. We had breakfast and hit the trail. The log crossing over Nickel Creek had rolled onto its side and the hand railing was gone. Log bridges in Mt Rainier can have short lifespans as they get washed away from all the flow coming off the mountain. We quickly arrived at Box Canyon and stopped at the overlook. Box Canyon is a narrow slot canyon carved by a rushing fork of the Cowlitz River 180 feet below. We got to Stevens Creek and marveled at the job the water had done smoothly polishing the rock. We began the steady climb up Stevens Canyon. There was one spot coming up that was cause for concern. When I picked up my permit, the ranger warned us of a washout in Stevens Canyon near Maple Creek. Days earlier, another hiker warned me that the crossing was a bit sketchy. He said, "Just don't fall, 'cause it could be bad. Thanks." We stopped for a snack at the beautiful Martha Falls at Unicorn Creek. We got to Louise Lake and decided to stop and have lunch. Not a bad spot for our final lunch on the trail. We got to Reflection Lakes. I recognized this spot in many photos of Mt Rainier. Unfortunately for us, there'd be no reflection of the mountain in the lake at this time of day. We now began the final long descent to Longmire. Raptor and I looked at each other and said, "Well, it's all downhill from here." We came out of the forest to the Nisqually River. We came upon more day hikers, so I knew we were getting close to the finish. I was feeling a range of emotions at this point, but most of all, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Mt Rainier gave us a gift with this experience, and I was grateful to be sharing it with a good friend. I know one day when we're much older, we'll reminisce about that time long ago when we hiked the Wonderland Trail and what an unforgettable experience that was.